like we've opened up the Zoom. So a huge thank you to all of our panelists today. I'm Caroline. I'm the graduate assistant working on the community engagement team for the Internet of Things Precision Agriculture Project with the NSF. You're going to learn all about that today with our awesome panel. I'm going to be sharing my screen now just to welcome us all in, get you all oriented. You're able to download these slides if you'd like. I'll put the link in the chat. We will be able to push this out. We also have a new Connect extension group. We'll include more details about that in the follow-up email, which will be great. But I know we have a mixed group today. We got people from Extension. I think we have some growers on the line, maybe some people who are just really curious about the Internet of Things for precision agriculture. So please go ahead, introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're calling in from. Tell us if you already have a question, go ahead and throw that in there too. This is an informal group. We're here to make this conversational and make this webinar what you want it to be and what you'd like to learn about. But the title of today's event is Community Engagement for Precision Agriculture, Uniting Producers and Researchers for Sustainable Food, Energy, and Water. And once again, this is from the Internet of Things for Precision Agriculture, IoT for Ag for short, which is an NSF Engineering Research Center. And we're very grateful today to our host, the PI Center at UF, the UF Center for Public Issues Education. So I'm actually going to briefly pass the mic to my colleague Philip Stokes from the PI Center. He's going to introduce our three speakers who will be answering your questions today, presenting, and facilitating a discussion at the end. So if you all want the chance to communicate with us in the chat throughout, you can. But near the end, you'll also have the opportunity to go on camera as well. Our video, if you'd like that, we'll be able to promote you to a panelist. But more about that later. Over to Philip to introduce our speakers.
Sure thing. Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining and just briefly say a couple things. Caroline already mentioned this, but you can use the chat to put in questions and comments. We'll also be keeping an eye on the Q&A as well. So if you put things in there, we'll check on that. And then today's webinar is being recorded. So you'll be able to share this with friends and colleagues. Afterwards, we'll email that out to everyone who registered. So yeah, at this time, I'm going to do very brief introductions for our panelists, and then I'll turn it over to them. So first off, I want to introduce Dr. Cherie Kagan. She is the Center Director and a Professor of Electrical and Systems Engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. And by the way, when I say Center Director, I'm referring to the NSF Internet of Things for Precision Agriculture Center. Dr. David Arnold is a Site Director for the Center and the Center's Innovation Ecosystem Director. Dr. Arnold is a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Florida. And finally, Dr. Katie Stouffer is the Center's Workforce Development Co-Lead and is a Research Associate Professor in the Department of Agricultural Education and Communication at the University of Florida. And you'll be hearing from all of them today. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over. I believe Dr. Kagan is going to start us out.
Great. So I know as Caroline's she's in control of the slides, so I'll get you to maybe click over to the next one. But I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm Cherie Kagan, and I'm very excited to introduce you to the Internet of Things for Precision Agriculture. Caroline, yeah, there you go. So I'll just share with you a little bit about the center. I also wanted to start with what the real mission of the center is. The center, as I'll describe, really brings together a broad scope of people from academia, industry, government, and we welcome obviously here the inclusion of stakeholders that are really important to the overall mission. So the mission of the center is to create and translate to practice Internet of Things technologies for precision agriculture, and also to train and educate a diverse workforce that's going to address this challenge of food, energy, and water security. And so as you see here depicted on the left is something that looks like a very busy schematic, but it's one where we look for different types of cropping systems to look at the opportunity where, as we were looking at where we are technologically, the opportunity for us to introduce different types of technologies, whether they be from hardware technologies, things that you know from information technology, or with the development in data science, that we could really take and look at how do we address challenges in agriculture, and to think about perhaps a difference in the way we think about what precision agriculture could be today from its inception, say about 30 years ago. And so we think about whether in all of these depictions, I'll introduce them to you technologically in a handful of slides as we look at what's in this schematic. But really what we're after is to think about how do we bring different types of hardware and software, these kinds of technologies together, so that we can look at how do we capture the microclimate in cropping systems, how do we get this sort of spatial, temporal, and different compositional, different types of targets that we want to understand in the field, so that how do we understand those that, for example, create stresses, so that we could ultimately look at how to manage them and improve our farm management practices. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see that, Carolyn, you're clicking. Maybe it's a little slow over the internet to refresh. But if you could go to the next slide, you'll see that this center is one that is funded by the National Science Foundation. And Carolyn, is it a little slow to update, or? Yep, there's a lag.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a lag. Let me stop sharing and reshare. One second.
Out.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I think there's just a little bit of a lag, but we'll get it back on track.
Okay, sounds good.
We have just a reminder too to the attendees, please introduce yourself in the Zoom too, because we really want to hear who you are and figure out where you're calling in from. So don't be afraid to say hi as well. Okay, let me share my screen again. All right, we'll get back on track. Yeah, Zoom has that classic lag, so I think we're good. Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, great. So if you go to slide 4 in your deck, I was just introducing, I think David Arnold just posted it for you just a little bit about the center. It's one that's funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation. It's in a program called the Engineering Research Center Program, which is one of their large programs. And it's a center that was launched in September of 2020. We're now coming to the end of year 3. But it's a center that will run for hopefully 10 years, at which point we look for it to be self-sustaining. And I'm going to briefly take you through the examples of the kinds of research the center does, the activities that we have in workforce development and diversity and culture of inclusion, and really the importance of engaging with you as part of our innovation ecosystem. So if you go to the next slide, Carolyn, what we'll see is that with our appropriate Zoom lag here, I guess. I just wanted to give you a picture of lots of the faces and people that you may see. We, really welcome people to become part of the center. You'll see lots of the faces. Some of you might recognize if you're, I see some of the names local to the University of Florida, the Hilton on campus, or some of the other facilities out at Live Oak. But, these are, it's a group that comes from 4 different universities, from the University of Pennsylvania, Purdue University, the University of California at Merced, and the University of Florida. And then we also have partners in evaluation at Arizona State University. So lots of the faces that you see here come from all of our different universities and really bridge expertise that go, all the way from academia, industry, and government that are in these spaces, as well as people who may be focused on the technology side to really on the ag side, and even to things like, as well as the extension as well. So I'd like to maybe ask you to go to the next slide. And in that slide, I'll start to introduce you a little bit more to, to some of the kinds of technologies that we're working on. So in that earlier slide, we had a schematic, but this just sort of gives you some real examples of what we're trying to do. And what we're looking at is to think about not just building technologies, but building technologies specifically that meets the agricultural specific use case. So what does that mean? We're looking at technologies that speak to the scale of agriculture and farming, to think about those environments that the technologies have to operate at, and also being very cognizant, starting at the design of these types of technologies, on what their costs will be, and how do we make sure that they could be integrated with current practices so that they would be adopted. And this is an important part that we also want to learn from the stakeholder community to really help us work on the right kinds of projects and things that are important that you're interested in. So we kind of divide our work as a group to agriculture sensing systems. This includes thinking about not just current off-the-shelf kinds of sensors, but developing new sensors that really could allow us to think about this question of scale and getting at information and data in the field that we don't have today. And so we think about sensors that could be buried in the soil and sensors that could be put on leaves that you could put them out and they'd be compatible and biodegrade. We think about how do you get the data from those sensors and take advantage of not only existing farming infrastructure, but as well as aerial and ground-based robotics that are increasingly being explored for agricultural applications. We think about the challenge in communication, for example, in getting the data out, particularly thinking about the rural environments of many farms. So that may not have things like broadband. So how do we get data from sensors to farming systems and from farming infrastructure out to the cloud? And as well as how do we power those at field scale? And then finally, we think about if you get all this data, how do we integrate all of that data together so that we develop models that are really grounded in the physics of the cropping systems? And then how do we then make platforms and interfaces that serve as ones that would be adopted and easy for people to use, and ultimately giving them an idea and recommendations of how to best manage their farm. So Carolyn, if you go to the next slide, we think about a big part of this center is thinking about how do we get these kinds of technologies and bring them out and integrate them into example farms. And one of the things that we do is that we organize our ideas around thinking about different types of cropping systems, whether those be row crops or tree crops. As I'm waiting for the slide the next slide to make it, we really look at and bring these kinds of technologies to the research and education centers around all of our campuses. So maybe I'll have you click a little bit faster. This just sort of tells us the story of how we bring all these together. On the bottom, it shows the kinds of research projects that we have that really span across all of these kinds of ideas of sensors, robotics, energy communications, and data science to really build the full story that would allow us to understand, in particular, some of the targets that you see here that you might be interested in measuring on the farm. Carolyn, I don't know if you've clicked to the next slide. I'm trying to memorize the order in which I created.
We want slide 8, right? We want the IoT for ag beds. Awesome.
Great. So this is an example where we really think about how do we put these technologies to work and integrate all of those technologies together to be able to address both row and tree crops. And we think about and work, for example, in the research and education centers at Purdue, at the University of Florida, and the University of California, Merced, as well as with other industry and regional farming capabilities across the country. And so we've organized too. How do you think about organizing this work and bringing technologies together? We do that through things like what we call joint ops. And those joint ops also look at how do we do that to address particularly important problems in agriculture today. So for example, we have one in optimizing nitrogen application in row crops, another one on optimizing water use in tree crops, and we're just launching a third one to look at understanding and managing pests and disease. So if you go to the next slide, it just I'll let you click through these a little bit faster. But what we do is you can see again these little depictions of projects, but it really comes from all of these kinds of technologies where we're bringing them together in the farming capabilities that we have to really look at how do we address them. And that's really the motivation of the joint ops. Really gives us both the structure to bring those technologies together as well as to address important problems. Carolyn, the next slide, please. Trying to guess my transition here. So I just wanted to transition. I just have a few more slides just to introduce you to some of the other kinds of programs and activities outside of research. So a big part of our center is in workforce development and from a diverse community of participants. So we have activities for pre-college education. We have activities for professional education, as well as for university and community colleges. And so that could be through things like hands-on activities. It could be through formal courses. It could be research. It could also be in sort of demonstrations and field demos, for examples, and workshops that help on an educational side, really to go all the way from K through 12 education through professionals, as we look towards, helping from an educational standpoint of thinking about and learning about the opportunities for these types of technologies that could be brought to agriculture, as well as the sort of inverse side of really getting people's feedback to help guide us in the programs and what we really develop here and understand their needs. So if you go, Carolyn, to the next slide. The next slide will be about diversity and culture of inclusion. We also, really do speak to all sorts of, I won't read this, it's a little bit of an eye chart, but this just shows, we really think about how to speak to very different types of diverse communities, all that are important in really looking at how do we have everybody come together to really address this, these sort of everybody's individual interests, as well as we think about as a whole the importance of precision agriculture and these questions of food, energy, and water security. So sprinkled around this, we think about all sorts of opportunities in research, education, and innovation, and really bringing in that these sort of end use and stakeholder community. So if you go to the last, I think is maybe there are two slides. The next one is on innovation ecosystem. And my colleague, David Arnold, is a leader of our innovation ecosystem activities. What you'll see as the slide emerges is that, we really have and welcome two different types of groups, but we really have looked for partnerships so that we can really guide our research and deploy our research into systems that would be valuable. And so we have formally what's an industry membership board. They are the industry members are fee paying, and we also have something that we call the Ag Systems Advisory Board, which we created for this center so that we could really have ag professionals and end user growers really come and join us and be part of the center and really give us their guidance. And so you can see our universities are in the Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, and West. And you can see if you look at the map here on the bottom that, there are lots of companies as well as members of our Ag Systems Advisory Board that are color-coded here that have joined the center and really serve as building this body that really works together with each other and with the center to really help us deliver on these ideas. And these really go across the spectrum of looking at our technologies to the integrated systems to getting them out for end use. So finally, I'll just have you go to the last slide. That really just puts a sort of summary on all of the activities of the center to sort of finish telling our story. As it comes up, you'll see back that first picture and really coming back to what we hope to, oh, nope, I forgot. We did have one. I added the one. We also, by the way, it's a little bit of advertising. We try and get out there in the community. We do hold seminar series and have different informational things that are really accessible to different communities. I welcome you to find us on YouTube, where you can find more of our recordings and programmings and things that we put out. We try and get out to different types of communities, as you can see from, research and agricultural extension kinds of programs, and so you may recognize different components of these as well as educational programs. So Carolyn, just the last slide. Feeling more confident that I have memorized the order of these slides as they arise, and so maybe I'll just finish up with this last slide, and then we can sort of turn it. Oh, no last slide. That's fine. I'll finish with that. We really, welcome participation in this center. That's, we're really here to engage the community and to say that we're excited to really work together to address the opportunity as well of bringing these technologies for precision agriculture together to really use our educational platforms and really encourage the translation of these to practice. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, and I think, well, we're definitely going to be asking you lots of questions. So we have a little bit of a question break right now. We have a few minutes here before we get into the community engagement piece that Dr. Stouffer is going to go through. So don't be shy, everyone. Put your questions and observations in the chat. But I'll kick things off with a question for you, Dr. Kagan. I'm super curious. What has been the biggest surprise with IoT for ag so far? I know y'all are, on year 4. You just submitted that big old report, but what's been the biggest surprise with your work on this program?
Yeah, so beyond the reporting, which is, I don't know if I should say it's a surprise. I wish it were. I think that the enthusiasm of as we reach out to a larger community and the appreciation of the project and program is something that I don't know if it's a surprise. It's exciting. I think maybe that's the way that I would put that I would say, and it's something that I think just bringing together different communities that are enjoying sharing their interests and expertise with each other is certainly, I'll say, rewarding. I don't know whether it's surprise what our goal is or continue, and so, but it's something that I think I'll say more is exciting. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask David. Is there something that you find surprising?
Yeah, I think for this audience, which seems to comprise a lot of extension agents, especially from Florida, there's a lot of enthusiasm around AI and ag, and a big center that was just stood up at the Gulf Coast REC. One thing I want to note is that our center, and there's a number of other USDA funded ag AI centers. One thing that's unique to our group is a focus on the actual hardware technologies, the actual sensors, the improvement of the robotics, making them, more cost effective. And we didn't get into all the sort of visionary concepts that we have that we're moving, up the technology readiness. But I just want to emphasize that this team is very multidisciplinary, bringing together engineers and material scientists and chemists, all the way up through agronomists and agricultural economists and other across really bridging the gap between engineering and true experts who have more expertise in horticulture, plant science, and others.
Exciting. And we also have some exciting questions in the chat. So one of our attendees wants to know, are you only looking for industry partnership, or is there any room for expanding university partnership beyond the 5 featured universities? So maybe Dr. Arnold, would you like to take that one? Are you only looking for industry partnership, or is there room for more universities?
Absolutely, not just industry. The NSF ERC program is always, you expected these centers to have an industry membership advisory group, but we specifically added, because of the unique nature of the ag industry and all the different people who help make this industry go, our ag advisory board, which comprises, grower groups, crop consultants, extension agents, different affinity groups, such as Hispanic farmers, small farmers, et cetera. They're Cotton Incorporated, you name it. So just lots of people in addition to individual producers. I will say we would like to get more individual producers to engage with us. I think they're the last people in their circle that we need to really engage, and especially people who are forward-looking and open to new ideas and what the future of industry could look like. That's something that you could specifically help us with. In terms of the member universities, those are fairly well fixed. About 5 years ago, we actually submitted this proposal to National Science Foundation, and I think the universities are pretty well, fixed. Except there's definitely opportunities for some affiliation and affiliate faculty. So if you have genuine engagement and would like to start some collaboration with faculty who are already in the center, please definitely email us and let us know.
Maybe the other thing I'll add to David's last point about affiliation is that we do and welcome having members of other universities who to join us as affiliates, as you mentioned, but we also do work and have worked with others and are encouraged by the National Science Foundation to work to bring in others and apply for other sources of funding to augment that here in the center. And so we continue to do that. And if there are interested folks who would like to get more involved and to work with us to explore those opportunities, we certainly welcome them.
I
All
see,
right, and we got
John has another question about applications on nursery crops. I think, agriculture is a huge industry, so we did have to, kind of scope the project. Right now, we are focused on row crops and tree crops as our two primary focus areas. I know, Florida has a lot of specialty crops and indoor nurseries, and there's a lot of interest in the Northeast for indoor growing vertical systems and others. So right now, well, those are not part of our core focus, but obviously a lot of the technologies and platforms that we develop can be used and employed in a variety of production systems.
fantastic. I think we have time for one more question, which is great. We have a great one in the chat. So one of our attendees says, I believe the challenge for growers is to deal with many different platforms created by each different company to display data to models derived from their specific sensors. Will the center address this issue?
Yeah,
Maybe Dr. Arnold, do you
maybe I'll give an
Go ahead, Sherry.
I was going to start just by giving an example where there actually are projects, for example, where we look at how do you take what might be different platforms. So there are there are examples where we're working on software technologies that could take, for example, the different outputs of different types of, for example, of technologies and be sort of agnostic to what those are, but then to provide the integration to then take the data out to the next level. So we are, cognizant, of course, that, the industry will have lots of different people participating and different, what I mean by that, by different companies participating with different technologies on different platforms. And so there are different stages where we do look to think at how can we be agnostic to those and provide a way and a platform to be able to integrate those so that, ultimately you would have flexibility on at one level and then still get the sort of integrated system perspective for actually managing your farm. So we do have some projects to look at that, probably not the whole thing yet, but, an example of where we have those same ideas in mind.
Yeah, if I could just add really quickly on that theme, the data overload, how many different apps and communication things do you use to communicate with your colleagues, your kids, your parents and family? Our world is a little bit overwhelming. And so, we are aware of that challenge. And so the other side of that coin is we all like automation in our life, but we're not sure how much farmers are willing to, trust the machine or any kind of machine learning, this big data. When you start to hide things from the user, especially with people with deep expertise in their particular, crop, that we're not sure. And that's something that we really want to delve deeper into understanding how farmers would use a different advisory platform. How far are they willing to go and trusting some of the decision making? We've also learned a lot about, farmers already with some of the technologies they may be using already feel a little bit overwhelmed, even if it's something simple like a soil moisture sensor. If they have more than 2 or 3 or 10, it's too much data. And so how do you go from data to actual actionable interventions? That's really what we want to get to.
Fantastic. And I lied. There's one more question, but this is a really good one. So we'll do this and then get to our community engagement. One of our attendees has a 2-part question. Part 1 is, do you have a demonstration of your outcomes in the future? And part 2 is, how can extension agents access your research outcomes?
Yeah, I think that we are, we do have field scale demonstrations going on currently at NFREC right now at 2 locations. One is in Live Oak and the other at Quincy. So those will be in Florida. And then, of course, in the other states, we have field trials going on. It's probably the best thing. I think also, specifically for those of you with specific interest, I did put my email here. Again, if you're University of Florida related, I can connect you with myself and with others at NFREC and really help on an individual basis do this. We don't yet have any EDIS publications or anything out there. That is a long-term goal of the center, to help start to translate and put some accessible documents out to the community. But we're still in sort of the early stages of the technology development of that process. But at the end of the center, I think that was definitely an objective.
All right, well, we'll keep it moving. So thank you again, everyone, for those thoughtful questions, and we'll have time for many, many more questions. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. So if you all can go ahead and answer that, just to kick things off before Dr. Stouffer takes us through community engagement. We want to know, how comfortable are you at participating in community engagement? Are you super comfortable? Could you use more help? Are you not really comfortable? Get your responses in. This is a safe place. Also, this poll is anonymous. So even if you're not really comfortable, we want to know that too. In fact, maybe we'll have more to talk about if you're not really comfortable. So everybody's getting their answers in. It looks like so far about half of you are super comfortable, which is great. And then, I see as more people answer, we're at 60% could use more help. So keep on getting your answers in. Also share your ideas in the chat. We really want to hear from you. And we want this is the conversational portion. Community engagement is something we can really co-create together, which Dr. Stouffer will get into that. So I'm going to end the poll in 3 seconds. So go ahead and participate if you haven't yet. Last call, 3, 2, 1, end the poll, and we'll share those results. So as you can see, about 47% of you are super comfortable, 53% could use more help, but it looks like nobody's not really comfortable, which good news there, I suppose. So I'll stop sharing that and then pass the mic over to Dr. Stouffer to talk us through what we mean by engagement.
Well, I will note that some people did not actually answer the poll, so we can't be entirely sure that not anybody is willing to admit they're not at all comfortable, but that's okay. I think as we go forward in this work and our work in ag in general, within ag, we've had a long tradition of having sort of a separate ag communication and education department, but also kind of woven throughout. So as some people enter the profession in different ways, you may have had a lot of experience coming up through ag where you have been working with extension, but you may also be somebody who came up more through a traditional or, a different kind of science path where we're still not really doing a lot of preparation and engagement. But so I always like to ask just to try and, for myself, pitch these at the right level too. So, but then I always go back to kind of giving an overview of what I mean by engagement. So you may have heard some of these terms here. And I think all of them have a role in this idea of engagement. The one that I really like to try and get us away from is this idea of training. If you know anything about behavioral psychology, training is kind of what's often associated with Pavlov's dogs and ringing bells and salivating for food. And it's really more of an automatic response. And so I know Extension uses that word a lot, but I really hope that for this project, we think a lot more about engagement, where we really are working together, because I have been on a farm, I don't know, the last time it's been years, right? So while I can theoretically think about some of these ideas, really getting down into the nitty gritty, I can't do that alone. And while I have a lot of experience sort of translating words back and forth, I can't help people, go from the engineering to the field and back without input from both of those sides. So we're kind of working at that center, as many of us in Extension do, is trying to work between our engineers developing all these fabulous technologies and the people, on the front lines of growing our food, so that they really are useful, and at the end of this 10 years, NSF is like, wow, what a great investment we made. Look at all this way that it's actually getting deployed and making our food systems and our overall environment, safer and more sustainable. So if you want to see more about what I mean, philosophically about engagement, I have one of my EDIS pubs here, and I'll just put in a plug that, for those of you that are interested, I do this as my full-time job, so it doesn't have to be just for Internet of Things for ag. If you have other projects that I can help, you work better with people who are different audiences, please reach out. Next slide, if you would, Caroline. So what are we trying to do here in IoT for Ag? Is really bring this into this mutual exchange I was talking about. But I really want to center these community members, in this case, producers, and really, work towards this, like we said, working together. Engagement is this mutual exchange, right? That none of us is working in isolation, but really crossing over and back and forth kind of multi-directionally. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So how do we think about doing that? A couple of basic principles to start with. And you'll see that I'm pulling some examples from the CDC because a lot of this work crosses over to our health realm. And, you may see more and more patient research and patient programs that are really trying to involve the community. So this is a very similar type of stuff. But you always want to be clear about the purposes or goals of the engagement, right? So as Sherry and David talked about, these technologies aren't going to be any good if they're not actually used. So the goals of our engagement are really to get, the feedback and input all along the way from these producers so that, so that we can head off these problems such as platforms that, don't listen to all the sensors, or, one technology that is fundamental that, requires some sort of access that somebody doesn't have, or some sort of preparation, and it's a high learning curve or something like that, right? And so we're also, in order to do that, we have to be very clear about what's going on in these producers' lives, and that's all this stuff about culture, economic conditions, social networks, who they're talking to. So we're talking to a lot of you all because you all are working with producers, right? So how do we bring this group together? Building trust, as we talked about, right? And then experience is a huge thing. So, we're fortunate in a lot of ways that Extension has good relationships with a lot of producers, but there's a lot of groups that we have traditionally left behind, even in Extension. And so in trying to work with those groups, we have to be really mindful about, repairing and rebuilding some of those relationships. So that's the part about understanding their their perceptions of us, at UF and Penn and all of our institutions. Maybe even the NSF, frankly, right? Or USDA. So all of these people that are involved. All right, we can go on to the next slide. We got another poll here that we'll launch for you. So now that we've talked a lot about this, and some of you, like Clyde, have surfaced different challenges for us. What do you think are going to be these challenges? Let us know. You talk to these people. What are we needing to be thinking about? That's really what we're doing with all of these community engagement sessions, which we're going to be talking about exactly what we're doing over the next months and years. But we really need to be hearing directly now what we need to be thinking about.
So people are getting their responses in. So everyone, please go ahead and vote. It looks like so far, a lot of people are indicating limited internet access, 13%, 33% say limited technical expertise. We got cost of technology at 47%. And then of course, we have someone who said other, and they put in the chat limited time. Yeah, that seems like a biggie for sure. So don't be shy about putting in your others in the chat too, and pick the one that you see is the biggest challenge there potentially. Or of course, we also encourage you to put your thoughts in the chat. So I'm gonna end the poll in 3, 2, 1, last chance. All right, end poll, and we'll share those final results. Yeah, so it looks like 13% thought limited internet access was one of the biggest barriers. 31% said limited available technical expertise. We got 50% who think cost of technology. And then for those others in the chat, we had someone who said limited time. And we have another person who says, I see a problem with the aging farm population. We seniors have a lot of resistance to change. All right, and we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, well, before we go on to that, yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about some of these other options that people pointed out, or other challenges. You know, this is definitely what we as an engagement team are trying to work with and overcome. And you know, yeah, technology and the national scope of this project are going to be huge barriers, even to getting producers to talk to us and to say, you know, I don't have time to talk to you. I need, you know, XYZ before I even think about this, right? So that's why we're, you know, you're going to see over the years, we're going to probably be repeating ourselves a lot, trying to make sure that we get a lot of perspectives and can hone in on reaching the people that are going to have the biggest barriers, frankly. I think limited, Kara, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but limited time also goes to limited money. So one of the things that we're definitely doing with these engagement sessions that we've got planned coming up are to, you know, pay honorariums, pay for their time. The problem will be that a lot of them, at least for now, are going to be virtual. But if you can tell us, you know, hey, you really need to be at XYZ meeting, we can work to get somebody there and engage people in person to talk about, Richard, you know, overcoming these problems of maybe technology, and then problems about overcoming just resistance to change in general. Luckily, our collaborators in Extension have done a lot of work about, you know, how to get innovations out. And, you know, our colleague Sebastian Galindo is also really does a lot of that. So finding key leaders in the population, and, you know, all of these things working through Extension, all these things that we know are good ways to reach people. And we're just going to have to be patient and take time to get it out there. But, you know, as some people say, the best time to start was, you know, 20 years ago, and the second best time is to start today, right? So that's what we're trying to do, and make sure that we're getting as many ideas on board, and especially those that are hardest to reach. You know, we can get the big firms on board. And Richard, I'd hope you would ask a little bit more about, or say a little bit more about your ideas for linking up with the major marketing companies. I'm assuming that those folks are not particularly on our industry advisors at this point, but if you have ideas about how they should be involved, I think you're thinking of things in a way that we hadn't, and that's exactly why we're trying to do this. So yeah, and Caroline points out, if anybody wants to say something instead of chatting, that's what we want to go ahead and do for the next couple of minutes here, is, you know, what else do we need to be thinking about as we plan to try and get this input? What strategies do we need to do? Oh, go ahead, Caroline.
Yeah, no worries. Just letting everybody know. Yeah, if you want to get on camera, if you want audio access, let me know in the chat. We will go ahead and make sure you have that access. But if you also just want to type your answers in the chat, that's fine too. But we got a question up here. We're wondering, how can extension agents and growers collaborate more closely with researchers to tailor their IoT solutions to the specific needs of their communities and crops? So I know that that's a big, broad question. It's just really meant to get us talking. And it looks like Richard just replied to us in the chat. I'll read it out loud for the sake of the recording. Richard, one of our attendees, says, I have worked for both of the companies I named. They and others all have technical departments charged with bringing all growers up to the same technical level.
Awesome, Richard. I think that's great. If that's where growers are going, then that's another resource we should be working with. And absolutely. It doesn't have to be just through Extension. What we're most interested in is getting this into the right hands. Absolutely. Great. We appreciate that tip.
And, you know, our panel can also answer this question too.
Yeah, the first question that was proposed was that, you know, we love for people, for you to get involved, right? And to, you know, join us. You can, you know, people who are interested, you know, could join our Ag Systems Advisory Board, for example, or, you know, participate in activities, you know, or field demos to come and give us, give us your feedback so that, we need your help too, right? So we'd love to have your engagement between academia as well as, for example, extension and growers and things like that. So we really are, here to ask you to join us and help.
Fantastic. And it looks like Mickey wants to get on the mic. So Mickey, you should have audio access if you want to share your input.
It's just that we've been working a lot. I have a sort of a different approach, which is I think farmers and the end users of research should be the people who direct the research, who make the decisions about the nature of the research. And they should be fully empowered, at least as much as the researchers are, to make decisions and have those decisions stick. So we've been doing that on some of the work in cover crops. And we've actually had people now, growers who sit on our think tanks. We don't call them advisory councils, we call them think tanks because we're asking people to think, right? And we've had one group that has asked us to take this length of our meetings from 1 hour to 2 hours to 3 hours. That's how engaged they are. I think that's serious signs of engagement. Farmers are busy people.
That's fantastic, Mickey. And yes, that's exactly what we need to hear and tell straight to our engineers that are on these projects. And I think that's what they want too. So I don't know if David or Sherry, you want to comment on Mickey's comment there.
No, we would love to, replicate. So maybe you have some secret sauce, Mickey, of how do we meaningfully engage? And that's what, Katie and Caroline are helping us do. So yeah, we want to get to 3-hour engagement sessions. That would be phenomenal. And to your comment about, we absolutely need input from the growers. Most of the engineering students working on some of these advanced technologies have never been on a farm. They're in their background. So there's a lot of cross-pollination of sort of level setting, understanding of what's the operational environment, how do they make these useful, just to keep from going down obvious dead ends from the beginning of a research program. So yes, absolutely. I echo what you said.
It looks like we got 2 more comments in the chat. So I'll start with Papoose and I'll let y'all respond and then we can move on to Jennifer's. But Papoose said, as long as research outcomes are expressed in terms of dollar values they can make, they will be willing to participate and adopt the technologies.
Yeah, that's really smart. We might need to make sure we have some economists that can help us think through if, I'm still pretty new to the center. We started in February or March. I don't know if there is an economist already on the team, but if not, we can pull in people and make sure that we have those numbers for sure. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, there is an economist on the team, but I think that expanding those to really, I think perhaps one of the pieces that we're hearing is also just to make sure that we can really express what the costs are. Costs are some things that we, it depends at what stage that project is as to whether or not we'll have what I'll say a more realistic cost, or some things that we know that could use technology, that would use capabilities that would make things lower in cost, but they're still developing, they're still emerging as a research project. So, there's really quite a large spectrum of where we want to go as a center. And I appreciate, Mickey's comments about, look, here are the real needs. And that's what we want to come down. And then also to sort of push from the other direction about what's even possible and how could we get there to meet those needs. And sometimes, obviously we'll have, it's like predicting a storm, right? As you get closer in the development of the technology, right? As you get closer, right, you have a better idea of really what that cost is, or other aspects that you'd want to consider. But that's something that I think we really want to push and get people's feedback about.
Jennifer says, I see an issue with drone technologies, DJI and others right now for Florida. I find it difficult finding those who can showcase drone technologies that farmers will be using, since we can't use those products. Specifically, working on integrating drone scouting to drone spraying. Does our panel have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think nationwide there's concern about DJI. There are other drone makers, and people are transitioning to other companies who make ag-specific drones. We do have a couple partners on our team who do both, spraying and scouting. And so, yeah, we can have a specific conversation about that. But yeah, it is sort of a top-down, shock to the system when there's just laws that now prevent the use of a specific, very popular platform. So we are aware of that, but I think that industry, there's obviously market for selling drones. So US-based suppliers or other allied nation suppliers will fill that gap in time.
Looks like we have another comment too from Nikki in the chat. Nikki, if you want to read that out, so folks on the recording will get it too, that'd be awesome.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you sound.
I'm just saying we need to get past partial budgeting. That's what we always use to determine the return on an investment, but it holds one thing constant, right? Holds everything in a system constant except one or two factors that you are manipulating experimentally. But the problem is that there is no such thing as a constant value in agriculture. There are the bugs, the storms, the weeds, it just doesn't hold true. It probably works in other kinds of economic activities, but not for us. And growers will tell you that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, so I'll say that, we certainly appreciate, even as we look at, different types of technologies, it's right, it's the whole thing that you have to look at to understand what the cost is. So we appreciate that comment very much.
And we have one more question. I know we're getting close to the end of time, but we want to give you one more piece of food for thought. So we are wondering, feel free to respond to this, everyone. In your opinion, what community engagement strategies can bring together researchers and agricultural producers in the context of IoT-driven precision agriculture? No wrong answers here, just one more piece of food for thought to get the discussion going. Maybe Dr. Stouffer, you could share some of your thoughts or what we've been working on.
Well, I mean, I think the spectrum that we've thought about for now is, the virtual sessions that can try and bring together people from across the country. And then also, though, going in person to regional conferences, grower meetings, whatever those are. But, we want to think creatively. And what I'll say about our budget is we kind of work up a budget for this project every year. So just because we haven't necessarily planned for it this year, we can plan for things in the future. So planning to involve in the test bed development that Sherry talked about, planning to get a grower in on that, like a longer term commitment if someone could make that, and planning to fund that appropriately. Those are definitely options. Richard says, yeah, a YouTube channel. Absolutely. So the project does have one, but it's probably right now pitched more to the researchers. So what I'd like to know more is, what do the growers need to see? So we can write our EDIS publications and make our videos, whatever, all day long from what we think about, but we need to know, do they need the legal advice on, how to deal with the changing legal environment of drones? Do they need how to get on the internet when they don't have, good broadband access? I don't know. I'm spitballing now, but that's
Ownership
the
of
kind
data
of thing.
is a big concern.
Yeah, ownership of data. Yeah, all of these. I guess we also have a lot of ideas, but maybe even prioritizing them as well would be helpful. But yeah, so if there's, like I said, especially if there's a particular meeting where you're like, you need to be here to talk to them, that's the kind of thing that we don't necessarily have access to.
Yeah, it's like a bit of a social network. I think this is the first, public engagement in this forum, and there'll be many more to come. So we would ask and invite your help if this is an area, if you want to know about, drones that you could put in a field, set it and forget it, that could operate by themselves and provide useful information, or sensors that could be planted into the field during planting in your seed drill. These are the kind of technologies that we're trying to make that operate without a lot of input from the person, from the farmer, but give useful, cost-sensitive information to allow that farmer to make decisions. So we would like to identify key people who have an interest to engage with us and inform us and tell us, what will work, what will not work. That's going to be helpful to us to make those decisions of where to fund, put priorities in our funding programs, which ones have the most opportunity to make an impact. So Mickey, you had some great comments before. I think we just need to continue to reach out. I appreciate that, people who are on this webinar today to do this initial engagement. But if you could think of 3 friends that you personally know who might be useful to hear about our center, or you might think, oh, wow, yeah, this person is really tech focused and they would love to learn more. That's the connectivity that we need to help multiply our reach, because that's really, as you know, friend of a friend is really how you can reach the right people. So I just want to put that out there.
And Tad has, I think, also a really good point that farmers trust when they see other farmers doing it. Show a farmer using the technology and farmers will be more willing to adopt it. So what we need are those individual producers that are willing to try things out with us, tell us where we're going wrong, help us make it work, and then that person can be, as you say, the person that we can show doing it. Absolutely. So, yep. So the next steps right now are we have these individual virtual sessions coming up just to keep going deeper on this. So if you've got somebody that couldn't make it today, especially a grower or someone that is like really thinking about this and would have the time to participate right now, we just have 1-hour sessions. So Mickey's got a great point. We would love to get to 3 hours. But we need the people first to get here and say, yeah, I'm committed to doing this. But even if somebody can just come for an hour for one of these sessions, we have lots of different ways people can get involved. Come for one of these for an hour, come and do some of these with us several over the year, or come and be, as Tad says, our early adopter that's going to try these out with us and really help us, move that on. So I think that's pretty much wrapping up. Caroline, do we have any other slides just to show? Yeah, exactly. So we need those farmers, Mickey, to say, hey, yeah, this is working for us, or no, this isn't working. We're not going to spend more time on it unless we do it this way. Like I said, we can plan for what we think, but we're not the actual producers. So we would like you, if you would do a survey, if you think of more thoughts after this. Oops, we got the other poll. And then, yeah, here's the engagement team as well. So we thank you just so much for joining us, and hopefully you'll be coming along for the ride for the next few years and into the future for all of us. So thanks again to the Pi Center. Philip, do you have anything for wrapping up, or are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. Thank you so much. And wonderful engagement all around. The only thing I'll say is I'll send out a recording to today's webinar to everyone who registered. And for all of the panelists that are on, if there are specific links or resources you want to send out, I can also include that in those in that email as well.
Perfect.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
All right, we'll leave the survey up just for a second, just to give you all a chance to scan that QR code. You can also click the link in the chat, or you can just type in bit.ly IoT for Ag Web Pi survey right in your browser. Whatever way gets you to the survey, that'd be great. We'd love your feedback. Okay, going once, going twice. It'll be in the follow-up email too. So if you miss it here, you can get it in the follow-up email. But I think that's it. Anything else from our speakers before we go?
Thanks, everyone. We really do appreciate all the ideas.
All right, well, I think we'll close up shop here, right on the hour. Go us.